Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the last part, I have discussed with you that how can we graph the consumption function. So whenever we have to draw the consumption function, we have to make an assumption that whatever our disposable income is, our consumption is the same. So by joining the same values with the same value, we get this 45-degree line, and this 45-degree line is actually representing your disposable income. After drawing this as imaginary line or the assumption based line, we have drawn the actual consumption line, which is based upon the data that whenever our disposable income is equal to 3,000, our consumption is equal to 1750. Whenever our disposable income is equal to 2,000, it is equal to 1440, and same 10,000 is 0 and 625. So we have plotted the consumption line, which is this line. What do you mean by the saving? We haven't drawn the saving line over here, but we can find out the saving. That saving is actually the difference between the disposable income and the consumption. So it's in terms of the maths and in terms of the graphs, it's actually the difference between the disposable income line and the consumption line. So whenever the disposable income line is up and the consumption is down, it means at this portion your savings are positive. And in this portion, when your consumption is high and your disposable income is low, so the difference between the disposable income and the consumption, it represents the savings, but in this portion your savings are negative. And what about this point? At this point your disposable income and your saving and your consumptions are equal to same. So at this point your savings is equal to 0. So savings is actually the difference between the disposable income and the consumption. If the disposable income is greater than consumption, then the saving is positive. If disposable income is less than the consumption, then the savings are negative. And if disposable income is equal to the consumption, then the savings are equal to 0. And the other concept which we have discussed is that what happens if your income is equal to 0. Whenever your income is equal to 0, you are dealing with certain types of the consumption. You are making certain types of the consumption in order to make your living better, if you make your living both ends meet. So what type of the consumption which you are making when your disposable income is equal to 0, that represents your autonomous consumption. And the condition of the autonomous consumption is only one, is that you are not earning something. Your income is equal to 0. Then at that point, whatever you are consuming is always the autonomous consumption. Now, whenever your income is equal to 0 and you are making certain consumption, the value of the savings are always equal to negative, because the consumption value is greater than the disposable income. And if you apply the formula, that is the 0 minus 625, the answer is equal to the 625. When the disposable income is equal to 0, the level of the consumption is called the autonomous consumption, and the level of the savings are always negative. It is equal to the minus 625. Now, saving is actually the vertical distance between the consumption line and the 45-degree line. Saving is negative to the left where the consumption line crosses the 45-degree line. Why? Because I have already discussed, because at here your consumption is greater than the disposable income. Whenever the consumption is greater than the disposable income, the savings are negative, and whenever the disposable income is greater than the consumptions, the savings are positive, and when both are equal, savings are equal to 0. This is the savings, that is equal to the minus 625. And why it is negative? Because of the fact that your income is less than the consumption. So this is the scenario that how can we find out the different concept by using the disposable income and the consumption. So in the first column we have got the GDP, that is equal to the disposable income. Disposable income is always used when you have deducted your taxes out of your income. In the second step, this is the consumption which is given to you. And in the third step, how can we find out the savings? By deducting, we have to deduct your consumptions out of the disposable income. So in the first step, then when your consumption is equal to the 375, your disposable is equal to 370. Now 375, and the answer is equal to the minus 5, which is not written over here. And how can you find out the average propensity to consume? The formula of the average propensity to consume is equal to the consumption divided by the income. You have to divide this value over these values in terms of the similar, like not in terms of the rows. That's 390 divided by 390, 4099 divided by 410, and same like this. You can see that whenever your average propensity to consume is greater than 1, your average propensity to consume is negative. It is equal to 1.1, it is equal to minus 0.1. Whenever you are going to add these values, you get the answer is equal to 1. So how can you find out the value of the APS? You can find out the value of APS by dividing saving towards that of your disposable income. So we have respectively among different columns, we have got these values, which is the APC, and we have got these values, that is the APS. So by adding these values now, 0.99 plus 0.01, 0.98 plus 0.02 is equal to 1.97 plus 0.03 is equal to 1, so on. 0.93 plus 0.07, the answer is equal to 1. Now how can we find out the value of the marginal propensity to consume? For that reason, we have to find out the difference between these values. So we have to find out the difference between the disposable income, that is always equal to the second value minus the first value. So the second value is 390 and the first value is 370. The difference between these values is equal to 20. And we have to find out the difference of the values with 390 and the 375. Now 390 is the second value and 375 is the first value. Now 390 minus 375 is equal to 15. So how can we find out the value of the MPC? That the change in consumption divided by the change in disposable income. Now the change in consumption over here is equal to 15 and the change in the disposable income over here is equal to 20. By putting these values in the formula, we get the 15 divided by 20 and the answer is equal to the 0.75. Here the point is missing, like this. Okay, 0.75 plus 0.25. Same is the case. How we can find out the values of the change in the consumption, change in the savings. That's second value minus the first value. Second value is the 5 and the first value is 0. So 5 minus 0, the answer is equal to 5. So by putting the values into the formula, we get the 5 divided by 20 and the answer is equal to 0.25, and by adding 0.75 with the 0.25, the answer is equal to 1. So you can see here the values of the MPC and the MPS are the same for all the values because of the fact the difference is the same. But the difference is different, then the values must be different. But one thing which should remain same, that the answer of the APC plus APS is always equal to 1, the same like that the value of the MPC plus MPS, the answer is always equal to 1, which I will give you in the form of your class participation at the end of this lecture. MPC plus MPS is equal to 1 and MPC and MPS measures the slopes. Actually, the marginal propensity to consume and the marginal propensity to save is actually representing the slope. In the last slide we have drawn the value, the consumption function, and what was the MPC in that case it was actually the slope. If we draw the saving function too, the MPS is representing the slope of that function. You know what you mean by the slope? It is the change in the y divided by the change in the x-axis. So this is the same concept which we use in terms of the maths. Now there are different types of the consumption. I have discussed with you the autonomous consumption. Now autonomous consumption was that part of the consumption at which their income level was equal to 0. The other consumption is the induced consumption. Now autonomous consumption is the level of the consumption where the disposable income is equal to 0. It also represents your y-intercept, and it is called the autonomous because it is independent of the change in the disposable income. If your income is not going to change, whatever the consumption which you are going to have at that level, it represents your autonomous consumption. Now, the induced consumption is that part of the consumption which varies with the level of the disposable income. As your income increases, your consumption increases. As your income decreases, your consumption decreases. That part of consumption is represented by the induced consumption because it depends upon the level of the income, and this one is not going to depend upon the level of the income because your level of the income is equal to 0 over here. As the disposable income rises, induced consumption rises. As it falls, induced consumption falls. So how can we find out the value of the autonomous consumption or the induced consumption? So this consumption is composed of two parts. C is equal to IC plus AC. IC stands for the induced consumption and AC stands for the autonomous consumption. If we have got any two values, that is C and IC. Now the difference between these two, it represents the autonomous consumption, and the difference between these two, it represents the induced consumption, like this. So I have to change the color of the pen like this. Okay. This is the level of the income. This is the level of the income. This is 0. And you are making this type of consumption. Now, this is the consumption which represents your autonomous consumption. Now, I am going to I'm going to show you that this is not a straight line, but you can say that. Suppose this green line representing the autonomous consumption. So, all this portion that is above the x-axis and below this C line, this is the consumption, and all this area like this, it represents the autonomous consumption because it is constant at 625 is equal to the autonomous consumption. So this area is the autonomous consumption. What about the induced consumption? So consumption minus autonomous consumption, it represents the induced consumption. So your induced consumption is all the area which is the difference between the consumption and autonomous consumption. So this all area, it is representing the induced consumption. So we have drawn this two lines, just two lines. One is your income line, another one is your consumption line. So we have find out the savings. That savings is the difference between, change the color. Saving is the difference between the income line and the consumption. Here's the savings are positive savings, and this area here the savings are negative savings, and at this point saving is equal to 0. So by drawing just two lines, we have discussed the concepts of savings, we have discussed the concepts of the autonomous consumption and the induced consumption. So the level of the income, if the level of the income is equal to 0, whatever of the consumption you are making, that is always equal to your autonomous consumption, and it's always going to remain constant. If your income is equal to 1000, your autonomous consumption will remain constant at 625. If it is equal to 2000, it will remain constant at 625. If it is equal to 3000, it will remain constant at 625. Now the difference between the consumption and autonomous consumption, it is actually the induced consumption, which you can see over here with the yellow highlights. So what is the savings? Savings is actually the difference between the disposable income and the consumption. If the disposable income is greater than the consumption, then it is positive. If the disposable income is less than consumption, it is negative. And if both are same, then it is equal to 0. If the disposable income is equal to 0, then what is the induced consumption? So induced consumption is equal to C minus autonomous consumption. So consumption is equal to 625, autonomous consumption is equal to 625, and answer is equal to 0. So if your disposable income is equal to 1000, what is the autonomous induced consumption? At this point, your autonomous consumption is equal to 625. So 1000 minus 625, your induced consumption is equal to 375. Now what happens if your disposable income is equal to 2000? Then your autonomous consumption is equal to 625. So 2000 minus 625, your consumption was equal to the 1440. Now 1440 minus 625, the answer is equal to 815, which is your induced consumption. So what happens if your disposable is equal to 3000? At 3000, your consumption is equal to 1750. So 1750 minus 625, the answer is equal to 1125. So how can we find that whatever your autonomous consumption is, you have to deduct it from the consumption, and the answer is your induced consumption. So consumption is composed of two parts, induced consumption and autonomous consumption.